It is noon in the East and 9:01 on the Pacific Coast. This is Lunch with Lincoln. Good afternoon. I am Jeff Timmer, and I've become your semi-regular Friday host of Lunch with Lincoln. We talk a lot about what has going on in Washington and how that affects our politics. But the fate of democracy is going to be decided in key states, and one of those key states that's going to play a very important role this year is Ohio. And joining me today is Desiree Tims, who is the CEO and president of Innovation Ohio. Desiree, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I'm really excited to be here and to share why Ohio is so important and all the critical and important work people here on the ground are doing in this state.
Well, tell us about Ohio. There's so much going on there. There's been a lot about redistricting in the news. Certainly, there's some, key players. Some of the Republican kooks like Jim Jordan get a lot of attention. The Senate race, Josh Mandel and J.D. Vance are sucking up a lot of the oxygen. So, we certainly have a lot to talk about. How do you see the landscape in Ohio this year? What are the important things that you're focusing on?
Jeff, you nailed it. Ohio is such an important state. We have a lot of electoral votes. It has traditionally been a battleground state, but unfortunately, recently, in the past decade, Republicans have gerrymandered and rigged the maps in such a way that suppresses the votes. We are a state this year in 22. We have a gubernatorial race as well as a Senate race. We know just how important the Senate is. We can't even get basic voting rights passed. And so the opportunity is ripe for Democrats and for people who really care about democracy to invest in Ohio and really support the important work that we're doing. Jeff, you mentioned gerrymandering and redistricting. Our state Supreme Court, which is bipartisan, by the way, ruled that the Republican-led redistricting commission authored and created an unfair map. They asked them to do the right thing. They sent them back to the drawing board. And what the Republicans did was they sent back the same exact map. They made little tweaks. And so it's clear that they don't want to follow the law. So the party that was once the party of law and order disrespects orders, disrespects the laws, and disrespects the courts.
Yeah, that's very fascinating what's been going on with the redistricting there. You've got the Supreme Court in Ohio, where one of the justices is the son of Governor DeWine. And there was a lot of pressure, I know, on him to recuse himself from the case. But nonetheless, the majority of the court, in what was, I think, considered a surprise to many political observers across the country, did throw out that congressional map that was heavily gerrymandered and the state legislative maps, also heavily gerrymandered. I think that is a real surprise, and how the congressional map ends up shaping up could be a decider in who controls the House of Representatives in January of 2023.
That's exactly right. The Democrats have a very slim and narrow majority in the House. And what the Supreme Court in Ohio did was said, look, the people of Ohio, on average, vote about 55 to 45% Republican and Democrat. And what the Republicans put forward was maps that they gave them 75% of the power. Well, a few years ago, we had a ballot measure where Ohioans got to vote on if they wanted a fair redistricting process and what they wanted that process to look like. And an overwhelming majority, Republicans, Democrats, independents, everybody said, we want fair maps. We want our vote to count. We want to see more races where that member of Congress or that state rep or that governor wins by 500 votes, right? Because they know every vote counts. That is not what we're experiencing right now. Unfortunately, the Republicans have just usurped all power, and they are like, we're not listening to the Supreme Court. We're going to do what we want to do. We're seeing that happening nationally, and we're seeing it happening here. And more, as we get closer to 2024, 2022 election day, Republicans are playing towards Donald Trump. They are just vying for his attention and his stamp of approval. And it's really making the politics and policies that we're seeing being put forward very extreme, and they don't reflect the values of Ohioans.
When we watch the goings on in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate there, the candidates, the leading candidates, the one making the most noise, Mandel and Vance so far, uh, are acting like it's a race to see who can be the most Trumpy. And while that might position them well to win a Republican primary in the state, it would seem to position them very poorly to win in a competitive general election, especially one where the Democrats in Ohio and nationally are focused and rallied around Congressman Tim Ryan. And so, how do you see that race shaping up in the battle for control of the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, I think, well, the Democrats also have a primary with Senator or Congressman Tim Ryan and Morgan Harper. We're seeing a lot of momentum and energy behind Tim Ryan. And I think Tim Ryan has the polling that proves this race is winnable for Democrats. What we're seeing on the Republican side is just, frankly, it looks like warfare amongst themselves. Who can become the most Trumpy? We're seeing claims coming from Josh Mandel about anti-mask. We saw him burning masks for likes on Twitter. We saw JD Vance embrace Marjorie Taylor Greene in Cincinnati for an endorsement. These are people who don't reflect the values of Ohioans. You're exactly right, Jeff. Most people in Ohio, we're somewhere in the middle. We like a little bit of everything. We like balance. I'm a Libra, so I'm all about balance. We like a little balance with people who represent us. We're not 75% one party or 90% another. We're right somewhere in the sweet spot. I think the extremism coming from both JD Vance and Josh Mandel does not only them a disservice, it does the party a disservice, and it's not reflective of what Ohioans want. Josh Mandel is very swampy. JD Vance is very swampy. He's taken a really hard right turn from his hillbilly elegy days to Donald Trump. So it's quite a fiasco. I don't think it's going to work here. And this is why the Democrats have a real chance to win the Senate race. We're a state that elected Sherrod Brown. We're a purple state, and we can win this seat, and we can save as much as we can of our democracy in Washington by electing good Democrats here in Ohio.
Well, another thing that viewers across the country might not know is the scandal, the Republican scandal that rocked Columbus, rocked the state house there, removed a state speaker from office on a big bribery scandal, and the Republican Party has its share of image problems and optics problems within Ohio. Republicans may have controlled Ohio and Columbus for a period of time, but there's a lot going on that doesn't necessarily meet the eye of the national press and folks from across the country. How do you see that, the kind of the black eye that the Republicans have suffered as a result of that playing into the chances for Democrats in Ohio this year?
Corruption is a really big issue here in Ohio. Voters don't like corrupt politicians, period. Full stop. What Republicans did was they acquiesced to an energy company to the tune of millions and billions of dollars to bail out this company and pay for things on Ohioans' backs. Ohioans are putting forward and footing the tax bill and the electric and energy and utility bills of people in West Virginia, Indiana, Kentucky, people who don't even live here. This is not what this state is about. We need to make sure that the money that Ohioans bring home is enough to pay the rent, the mortgage, the car note, the busted tires from all the broken roads and potholes. This is about making sure that Ohioans can do what they need to do for their families. Republicans have been obsessed with corporate welfare, corporate handouts, and greed. The corruption scandal is something that is really it's painstaking and it's really sad because it's people who are working class, who are poor, who are working paycheck to paycheck, making minimum wage, which has stayed the same for nearly a decade. Those are the people who are getting hurt by the corruption and the corporate bailouts.
When we're looking at the U.S. Senate race and now some of the races for Congress that are likely to result in competitive districts after the redistricting map is finally settled, what kind of resources are being spent so far in Ohio? And are we seeing a lot of activity from third parties, from super PACs, from interest groups, from dark money groups?
I think we're seeing a lot of dark money groups on the Republican side. We've seen super PACs come in large numbers and huge waves for the tune of JD Vance and Josh Mandel. They've been on the TV and on the airwaves nonstop. While at the same time, we have Republicans in the state house working aggressively to overturn voting rights, working aggressively to move backwards women's access to reproductive health care. They're focused on issues that have nothing to do with moving Ohio forward. And so you have these two things at play here. While you have advocates and people on the ground who are trying to register people to vote, now you have the Ohio boards of elections. People are saying, wait, these maps are so chaotic. We have to have two primaries. You have to convince people to come out twice and do the work and volunteer. We're still in the middle of a pandemic here. So the continued chaos and disruption and sowing the seeds of discord by the Republican Party and the dark money interest is obvious. We see it on TV. And it makes it really hard for the little guy and the little girl and the activist who just wants to register grandma to vote, who just wants to make sure that we can pass legislation that will bring jobs back to Ohio, that we can pass bills that really improve the quality of life here. People are tired of struggling. We need to get back to kitchen table issues, jobs, the economy, a good education, living the American dream. Those things are out of reach because we have a Republican supermajority that is catering to the interests of Donald Trump. That does not serve the people of Ohio at all.
Now, your primary is coming up relatively soon. I know a lot of states have summer primaries, but yours is coming up this spring, and so the time seems to be ticking here. What is the timetable? What's expected to happen when it comes to ordering the maps so that there can be so that candidates know what districts they're running in for Congress and for the legislature?
Jeff, questions that need answers. We are in a situation where we simply don't know. We are in a very odd time. Whereas before we would expect Republicans to follow the law, to follow what the court says, to produce fair maps so we can have districts and a solid primary and everyone knows where they're running. That's not happening right now. The court just sent the Republican-led redistricting commission back to the drawing mat. We are in a situation where we don't know what the districts look like. It's so bad. It's so bad, Jeff, that the Republicans created a bill in the state legislature to allow people to just, get the required petitions they needed to run for office without knowing the district number, because they clearly have a plan to continue to sow discord in the process. So it's really bad because Republicans are just discarding the law.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned before laws or trying to change laws that affect voting rights. What kind of effort has been going on in Columbus to change voting rights, to change voting procedures since the last election? I know we've seen many such measures in state capitals across the country.
Yeah, we are not exempt from what we're seeing in states like Arizona and Georgia. What Ohio Republicans are doing, they are trying to limit for the drop boxes that we saw that were really popular during the last 2020 election because of COVID. They want to limit that to one drop box per county. Well, where I'm from in Dayton, in Montgomery County, it's not far from me. But if you live in a rural part of the county or you live somewhere else, you have to have sufficient transportation and time off work to make it to that drop box. That can be a 30-minute drive. And so people are getting really screwed with these, one drop box per county rules. Our Secretary of State, Frank LaRose, has also purged millions of Ohioans off the voter rolls. So sometimes you have people showing up to vote and they're not registered anymore. They've been kicked off. Sometimes it's because they haven't voted. Sometimes it's a mistake on the Secretary of State's administrative side. They accidentally kicked off the wrong people. So when you're constantly purging people from the voter rolls, you're limiting access to voting to one drop box per county. You're telling people, hey, your vote doesn't matter. We don't need your vote. We don't want you to vote. That's where we are right now. Democracy is on the line. And what Republicans have done is they've created this 50-state chaotic strategy where they are sowing discord in every single state legislature by state legislature. And we in Ohio have a Republican supermajority, again, constantly catering to the needs, wants, and wills of Donald Trump. And that is something that is just not working here. We are doing everything we can on the ground here at Innovation Ohio to raise awareness, to wave those red flags, to say we need resources, we need help, we need boots on the ground. We have to re-register people every single day because every single day they're getting kicked off the voter rolls.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little more about Innovation Ohio, like, how you got to this point and what kind of activities you have planned for this year, and tell us exactly how people who are interested, especially those folks in Ohio, how they can get involved.
Yeah, so I myself am a former Obama administration staffer. I worked for Senator Sherrod Brown in the Senate and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Traumatized myself by going to law school at night, Jeff. Don't recommend it. Just, it was a lot.
Yeah, I don't want to get any smarter.
And I came home and I ran for Congress in 2020 in a gerrymandered district. I outraised my opponent. And we saw year after year, no matter how much money you raise, no matter how the polls are looking, no matter how much support you have, you can't crack that district because the way it's been drawn. And now I have the pleasure of leaning into Innovation Ohio's work. We've managed the communications hub. We're doing research. We're educating grass tops leaders, advocates, and leaders on what they need to say, what they need to do to bring more people to the table. We know that if we come together as a collective, we can have a very loud message that will resonate and reach voters every single day across Ohio to let them know what's happening at the state level, what's happening at City Hall, what's happening in Congress, and how that impacts their lives and their work. And so it's such a privilege and honor to do this work and to help be a voice and have a megaphone here in the state for Ohioans.
Sure. I imagine there's quite a coalition of pro-democracy forces coming together, and it's great to see Innovation Ohio playing a role in that. Now, why don't we kind of lighten things up just a little bit? What's your thought on the Super Bowl this weekend? I mean, in Dayton, does that mean you're a Browns fan or Bengals fan, or how do you see the state divided on this, or does everybody become Bengals fans this weekend?
Jeff, you are going to get me in so much trouble. So much trouble. So Dayton is in Southwest Ohio, and I went to undergrad at Xavier in Cincinnati. So very in tune with the Bengals. So I think the entire state is fascinated and obsessed with Joe Burrow. So it's very much a Houday state this weekend in Ohio. My mom is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And my dad is a Steelers fan. And so you're going to get me in trouble. But my stepdad is a Bengals fan. And so, yeah, Southwest Ohio, Houday. Everyone loves Joe, though. So Joe is uniting. He's uniting the entire state from like Eastern Ohio to Southwest Ohio. Everyone's like, okay, Houday. Even the Browns are saying Houday this weekend. So we look forward to seeing Cincinnati be the Super Bowl champs after more than 30 years, and all the energy and excitement that will bring. We've seen Mayor Avtab Pureval go hard in the press against Mayor Garcetti about what's going to happen on Sunday. We're really excited about that.
Are you looking at other races in Ohio? We've talked about the U.S. Senate race. Does your group get involved in any of the other statewide races or in the legislative races?
So we are engaging all across the state. We just want people to vote and to be able to choose the person that represents them best. What we are doing is trying to raise awareness about the governor's race as well. We are seeing some extremism on the right. for the gubernatorial. We also see Governor DeWine. I mean, he was part of the redistricting lawsuits, and his son sat on the bench the whole time. I mean, whoa, what a conflict of interest there. And we just aren't seeing the leadership that we need to stand up against the extremism. There was a weekend a few months ago where Governor DeWine went down to Texas to the border. I mean, we border Canada. We don't border Mexico. So we're just trying to figure out what Ohio has to do with that. We want to make sure we have a governor who's focused on bringing jobs back to Ohio, who's going to help us build back better. We are looking forward to intel, thanks to Joe Biden's Biden boom. We're getting intel here in Columbus, and it's really exciting. People want to work. I think when we think about party labels, I like to keep it plain, kitchen table issues, keep it basic. People want a job. They want their kids to go to school. They want their kids to have a better life than they had. And then they want to die. Like, that's it. You just bring home a paycheck, live a good quality of life, pass it on to your kids, and you're out of here. So let's get back to that. We have a lot to do in order to get to that because of so much chaos and what has happened. So we're looking forward to an exciting governor's race, an exciting Senate race. And if we can get some districts, if the Republicans decide one day we should listen to what the Supreme Court says and actually make a fair map, they will still have the majority. It's not like they're going to lose the majority. It's just a fair map that we can maybe get some red to blue districts at the state ledge level and congressional level that we can really get behind and support. But we are not there yet because Republicans continue to literally sow chaos into the process. If you want to help us out, you want to invest in the work that we're doing, I encourage you to visit innovationohio.org and donate. Sign up on our list. We send out emails regularly throughout the week and updating people about what's happening at all levels of government. Again, that's innovationohio.org. We look forward and we welcome you into the fold and into this fight so that we can protect our democracy.
Now, as we talk this afternoon, I'm next door to you in Michigan, where things have been very disrupted by the chaos at the border with Canada. These right-wing protest blockades of the border and border traffic, and it's just in the span of a few days now really disrupted economic activity in Michigan, especially related to supply chain and manufacturing and the auto plants here. And it's rising to crisis level, and it's going to start to force layoffs and going to have a real economic impact on working families all across the state. And I imagine that this similar impact is starting to be felt in Ohio because there's a lot of manufacturing and dependent. Our economies are very similar. For all the ribbing, people in Michigan like to give Ohio, and Ohio likes to give Michigan. They're really not very different states. Very similar cousins. If not brother sister states. So I imagine that you're feeling some of those same economic impacts or concerns that folks here. I'm sure it's going to grow across the country because we've this disruption of the supply chain that's all tied back to this lunacy around COVID mitigation. In the people who are fighting COVID mitigation in now disrupting the economy in order to, I guess, have their tantrum.
That's right. We've seen the far right peddle extremism and sell it to other countries. We saw Steve Bannon, Rudy Giuliani, they're traveling the world trying to plant mini Trumps all over the world and really exciting and instigating a base of far right voters. And now it's having a ripple effect and an impact on commerce. Well, gee, who would have thunk? It's really sad that what we're seeing, these truckers and people who are falling victim to the cues of the world, they are misinformed, they are uninformed, and they've just fallen in this tunnel. We need to make sure that the goods that are transported across the border between Ohio and Michigan and Canada, across the Great Lakes, from Ohio's farmers, Ohio's manufacturers, and small businesses here in the state can get the goods they need so that we can keep the economy roaring. That's something that we need to do. It is intentional and an intentional act by the far right to disrupt the economy at a time when we really need to make sure people can get back on their feet as we begin to climb our way out of the pandemic.
Sure, you hit on something right there. The more economic disruption that they can create, the more they can cause chaos, the more they can cause concern and uncertainty and anxiety among the people. They think it makes for a better electoral climate. They're willing to sacrifice people's jobs, people's homes, people's ability to eat and feed their kids or buy medicine to fulfill their kind of sinister political aims here. And we've seen that we've seen it with voting rights, and now we're seeing it with not disrupting the economy in order to try to score their political points on COVID. And it really shows what we're up against, not just nationally, but in states like Ohio, like Michigan, like Arizona, like Georgia, where what happens in the state capitals, what happens in Columbus, what happens in Lansing, what happens in Phoenix really does matter in terms of being able to control these policies at the state level that have great impact on the national economy and on the state of democracy across the country.
That's exactly right. We should be championing the idea that America led the way with creating vaccines to help us get out of the pandemic. People should be thrilled that the vaccines are free. They're not even $1. You don't even have to give a quarter to check out to get that shot in your arm. We are leading the way in science and medicine, and we're leading the world. That's something to champion. That's patriotic. That's patriotism. But we're seeing a backlash instead. It is so unfortunate that we're seeing this, and we hope that the people will stand up and fight back. I know that there are more people who agree with us than agree with the extremism. So we just have to come together as a collective to protect and save our democracy and to make sure that these far extremists and their extremist policies and agenda don't disrupt our lives or the American dream. It's a great experiment, the great social experiment that is America. And I believe that although we are on a bumpy road right now, we will always come out on top.
Sure. Well, why don't you tell us again how to find your organization online, and more importantly, how to make a donation so that people can support the good work you're doing in Ohio.
Yes, thank you so much, Jeff. You can visit our website, innovationohio.org/donate, innovationohio.org/donate, and make a contribution. Follow us and add us on Facebook. Add me on Facebook. Add me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is in the Chiron with my name at Tims Desiree. And I would love to engage with you all online about how you can help us fight back to make sure that Ohio remains a swing state, that every vote matters, and that we can have the good American dream that we all live, need, and deserve here in this country. So we're in this fight. I would love for you to join us at innovationohio.org today. And keep helping us throw these punches that we need to throw so hard because we are in a really hard time right now.
Well, Desiree Tims, the CEO and president of Innovation Ohio, thank you for joining us this week. And folks, you can follow me on Twitter at Jeff Timmer. I promise there will be lots of swears when you do. And so with that, we are ready to close this Friday edition of Lunch with Lincoln with the latest ad launched this morning by the Lincoln Project. Emily, let's roll with the ad.
As all eyes turn toward America's Winter Olympians competing in Beijing, join us for the lesser-known 2022 Winter Coward Olympics taking place in Washington, D.C.
Today, multi-medalist DC veteran Kevin McCarthy shows us his perfect form in the 1,000-meter downhill moral collapse.
That's right, McCarthy, who faces stiff competition from rising stars Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene, has trained hard to bow to Donald Trump's big lie.
From this,
last week's violent attack on the Capitol was undemocratic, un-American, and criminal.
To this.
You know what, make it an appointment office. Come on, okay? It's not good to be
You just don't see this kind of performance very often. Just look at the flexibility.
And you thought that gymnasts were just at the Summer Games.
Yes, that's right.